The world has ended more times than it's actually existed, at least according to self-proclaimed prophets, cult leaders with calendars, and one guy who swore the Mayan apocalypse was just a scheduling error. We've dodged fiery meteors, angry gods, and computer programs that apparently couldn't count past 1999, all without leaving our couches. The funny part isn't that people made these predictions. The funny part is that millions believed them, sold their stuff, and then woke up the next morning like, guess Starbucks is still open. And if you think those were the dumbest doomsdays, trust me, we haven't even gotten to the truly brain-melting ones yet. 1. Back in 2012, the Mayan calendar supposedly predicted the end of the world. People stockpiled canned beans, survival bunkers sold out, and doomsday prophets cashed in like Black Friday scammers. And then, nothing happened. December 21st came, December 22nd came, and the only apocalypse was people awkwardly returning their survival gear to Walmart. The logic was that an ancient civilization just decided to stop carving calendars after a few thousand years. Because clearly, if I finish writing my planner in July, that means I don't believe in August. Honestly, the Mayans probably just got tired. Carving stone is hard. But thanks to a bunch of bad translations and Hollywood hype, an ancient culture got turned into the Y2K sequel nobody asked for. Spoiler, the world didn't end, but common sense sure did. 2. Speaking of Y2K, remember when computers were supposed to self-destruct at midnight on January 1st, 2000? Banks were going to collapse, planes were going to fall out of the sky, and your toaster was going to become self-aware. The issue? Computers didn't know how to process dates past 1999. That's right, we built billion-dollar machines that could calculate rocket trajectories, but couldn't handle the concept of tomorrow. Governments spent hundreds of billions fixing it. Survivalists filled their basements with bottled water, and at midnight, absolutely nothing happened. Planes didn't crash, banks didn't vaporize. The only real disaster was watching New Year's Eve coverage with your drunk uncle screaming, "The end is near," while his AOL email still worked just fine. Humanity survived, but we learned a critical truth. We fear our own bad coding more than meteors. 3. Nostradamus. The man, the myth, the eternal Facebook chain post. Supposedly, this 16th century French guy predicted everything. Hitler, 9/11, World War III, maybe even your bad haircut. In reality, he wrote vague poetry that could mean literally anything. Fire from the sky will destroy the city. Wow, that's either Hiroshima or my microwave exploding. Every time something happens, people rush to jam his cryptic rhymes into the story like conspiracy-themed Mad Libs. If Nostradamus really predicted the future, why didn't he warn us about Crocs, or Guy Fieri, or the Star Wars prequels? The truth is, Nostradamus wasn't a prophet. He was just history's most successful fortune cookie writer. And the fact that people still cling to his predictions says less about him and more about our desperate need to make chaos look like a plan. 4. In 1806, a chicken in Leeds, England, started laying eggs with the words, "Christ is coming," etched onto them. Locals freaked out, preachers cashed in, and crowds came to witness this feathered prophet. Turns out, it was a hoax. The owner wrote the messages on the eggs with ink, shoved them back inside the chicken, and let her relay them for dramatic effect. That's right, the apocalypse was predicted by a hen who had to suffer through recycled eggs like a feathery printer. Honestly, the real miracle wasn't divine prophecy. It was that this guy convinced an entire town that God's big message for humanity would arrive via scrambled breakfast food. If Judgment Day is announced through poultry, I'd at least expect a turkey, bigger stage presence. 5. The planet Nibiru theory claimed a giant rogue planet was going to slam into Earth in 2003. Then 2012, then 2017. Basically, whenever the previous prediction failed, they just penciled in a new date like a dentist rescheduling your root canal. NASA had to repeatedly step in to say, no, there is not a death planet hiding behind Jupiter. But people still bought into it because apparently science documentaries on the Discovery Channel are less convincing than a random YouTube guy with a blurry telescope. Fun fact, if a planet the size of Nibiru was anywhere near Earth, you wouldn't need NASA to tell you. You'd see it in the sky. But hey, why trust astronomers when Chad from Ohio has a blog post? 6. In 1988, a NASA engineer turned preacher named Edgar Whisenant published a book called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988. He sold millions of copies to people desperate for Jesus to show up and save them from their mortgage. The date came and went. No rapture, no angels, just a lot of disappointed book buyers realizing they spent $5.95 on glorified fan fiction. Undeterred, Wisnant released new predictions for 1989, then 1993, then 1994. Each time, more wrong than the last. By the mid-90s, his credibility was so low, he couldn't even predict what he was having for lunch. Yet somehow, people kept following him. Honestly, at that point, the rapture already happened. It just took everyone's brain cells. 7. The Hale-Bopp comet in 1997 sparked one of the darkest and dumbest mass predictions. The Heaven's Gate cult believed a spaceship was trailing behind the comet, ready to whisk them away from Earth, so they all exited together, wearing matching Nike sneakers. It was tragic, but also bizarrely commercial, like the worst sneaker ad ever. Their leader convinced them that life on Earth was a prison, and salvation was basically hitching a ride on a cosmic Uber. Spoiler, no spaceship appeared. The only thing trailing that comet was disappointment. It's a grim reminder that when people want to believe hard enough, even astronomy can turn into a late-night infomercial for eternal salvation, batteries not included. 8. In 1910, Earth passed through the tail of Halley's Comet. Scientists casually noted that the comet's tail contained trace amounts of cyanogen gas. Newspapers twisted that into, "We're all going to be poisoned from the sky." Panic ensued. People bought gas masks, churches overflowed, and one company even sold anti-comet pills to ward off cosmic death. Spoiler, we survived. The biggest tragedy was probably the guy who blew his paycheck on comet antidotes instead of rent. Honestly, if Earth's grand finale was us choking on a cosmic fart cloud, I'd almost respect it. But no, once again, the apocalypse got canceled due to lack of attendance. 9. Harold Camping, a radio preacher, predicted the rapture would happen in 1994. Wrong. Then he said 2011. Wrong again. His followers sold homes, quit jobs, and gave him millions in donations to spread the word. When nothing happened, he shrugged and said, "Oops, miscalculation." Imagine trusting your eternal soul to a guy who treats the end of the world like guessing lottery numbers. By the second failed prediction, people should have realized they weren't following a prophet. They were following the human version of Windows Vista. 10. In 1524, astrologers predicted London would be wiped out by a massive flood. Wealthy citizens fled the city, abandoning homes and businesses. And when the big day arrived, light drizzle, not even enough to ruin a picnic. The flood didn't come, but opportunists made a killing selling Noah's Ark-style escape boats. Imagine fleeing your mansion in terror, only to come back the next day and realize your neighbor just got free real estate because you panicked over a weather report. Honestly, Londoners basically invented the first fire festival. 11. The Millerite movement in the 1840s was the OG doomsday hype train. A preacher named William Miller predicted Jesus would return in 1844. Thousands of followers sold everything and stood in fields waiting for the sky to open. Nothing happened. It was dubbed the Great Disappointment, which is also how I describe Taco Bell after 1 a.m. Instead of admitting they got played, some followers doubled down, saying, "Well, maybe it happened, invisibly." That's not prophecy. That's just gaslighting. 12. In the 1980s, televangelist Pat Robertson predicted the world would end in 1982. Then later, he claimed it would happen in 2007. Both times, nope. Honestly, predicting the end of the world is a sweet gig. You just circle a date on the calendar, go on TV, rake in donations, and when it doesn't happen, shrug like a bad weatherman. Meanwhile, actual meteorologists get fired for getting the rain forecast wrong by 2 hours. Pat, he gets a second yacht. 13. The year 1666 terrified Europe because of the 666 in the date. People thought it was the devil's year, the grand finale of humanity. Instead, it was just a normal year, except for the Great Fire of London, which did wipe out a big chunk of the city. Not exactly the apocalypse, but definitely a strong audition tape. Imagine expecting fiery demons and instead getting a baker who forgot to turn off his oven. 14. In 2000, a psychic in Florida predicted a giant tidal wave would wipe out the East Coast. She sold thousands of survival kits, basically overpriced flashlights and canned beans. The date came, No wave. The only thing that drowned was her credibility. But here's the kicker. People still bought her next round of predictions. At this point, it's less about survival and more about who can run the best scam in cargo shorts. 15. Jehovah's Witnesses have predicted the end of the world multiple times. 1914, 1918, 1925, 1975. Each time, nothing. You'd think after 4 failed launches, they'd at least rebrand. But nope. Instead, they just quietly move the goalposts and keep knocking on doors. Imagine if Apple released a new iPhone that exploded in your pocket not once, but 4 times, and you still lined up outside the store. That's basically the business model. 16. In 2012, a preacher in Russia claimed the apocalypse was imminent and started selling survival kits with candles, vodka, and sardines. Because apparently when the world ends, what you really need is mood lighting and fish breath. People bought them in droves, turning doomsday into the weirdest Black Friday sale in history. When nothing happened, the preacher just kept the money. Honestly, sardines and vodka might not save your life, but they'll definitely make you not care it's ending. 17. In the 1960s, a Chicago cult called the Seekers predicted aliens would destroy Earth but spare the faithful. Members sold their homes, quit jobs, and sat around in tinfoil hats waiting for the mothership. When the aliens no-showed, the leader claimed their faith had saved the world. Classic cult move. Turn failure into proof. It's like showing up late to work and saying, "Actually, I prevented the building from catching fire." The Seekers didn't get abducted, but they did get a crash course in human gullibility. 18. In 1938, Orson Welles read War of the Worlds on the radio, and half of America thought Martians had landed in New Jersey. People grabbed shotguns, packed cars, and fled town like it was Black Friday at Walmart. Nobody stopped to think, maybe aliens wouldn't announce their invasion through AM radio. But hey, if there's one thing scarier than an alien invasion, it's the idea of trusting radio news. And the best part? Wells wasn't even trying to prank anyone. He was just doing dramatic reading. Congratulations, America. We survived the fake apocalypse of 1938, but only because the Martians never figured out how to cut into CBS programming. 19. In 2017, a Christian numerologist announced the world would end because hidden codes in the Bible said so. His exact method of calculation? Basically, mashing together random numbers, a dash of astronomy, and the scientific rigor of a toddler counting on their fingers. According to him, Planet X was supposed to collide with Earth in September. September passed, then October. Then his YouTube channel quietly pivoted to Bible studies. Nothing screams credibility like predicting global destruction and then deleting the evidence. If you're wondering why NASA keeps issuing press releases saying, "No, there's not a death planet," it's because of guys like this. Honestly, if Earth ever does get destroyed, nobody will believe it because these clowns already cried Armageddon 50 times. 20. The Black Death in the 14th century killed millions. But people were convinced it wasn't caused by fleas or rats. No, it was the planets lining up wrong. Medieval scholars thought the apocalypse was literally written in the stars, like some kind of cosmic Yelp review. Imagine blaming your cousin's death not on terrible sanitation, but because Saturn gave Mars a dirty look. Doctors back then recommended things like bloodletting, sitting in sewers to balance the air, and prayer marathons. Spoiler, none of that worked. But hey, it did give future historians endless material to laugh at. You have to admire the confidence of a society that looked at pus-filled boils and thought, yep, definitely Jupiter's fault. 21. In 2000, a doomsday cult in Uganda claimed the world would end on January 1st. Members gave all their possessions to church leaders and waited. The date came, no apocalypse, but rather than admit failure, the leaders rescheduled it like a dentist appointment. Eventually, when followers started asking too many questions, the leaders just locked them in a church and set it on fire. Dark, yes, but also deeply stupid. It's not exactly an apocalypse if you have to help it along with matches. If your religion promises God is going to destroy the world, but you decide to speed things up yourself, congratulations. You're not a prophet, you're just an arsonist with branding. 22. Remember the Large Hadron Collider? When it fired up in 2008, conspiracy theorists were convinced it would create a black hole and swallow the Earth. Scientists tried to reassure everyone, saying, "Don't worry, the chances of that are smaller than you winning the lottery while being struck by lightning on Mars." But panic spread anyway. Parents wrote angry letters, politicians got involved, and one guy even filed a lawsuit to stop science from happening. Spoiler, no black hole. The only thing it swallowed was taxpayer money. Yet somehow, people still fear physicists in Switzerland more than billionaires launching rockets for fun. Honestly, if the world ends, it won't be from a black hole. It'll be from Twitter, and we won't even get cool science out of it. 23. In 1994, a Korean cult leader announced the rapture would happen on October 28th. His followers sold their homes, quit their jobs, and gathered in white robes to ascend into heaven. Midnight struck, and nothing. Except angry families demanding refunds for the real estate fire sale they just held. The cult leader eventually admitted he miscalculated, which is an understatement on par with saying the Titanic had navigation issues. The funniest part? Some members stayed loyal, insisting God just changed his mind at the last minute. Imagine waiting for an Uber that never shows up and then convincing yourself the driver was still technically on the way. That's cult logic in a nutshell. 24. In 1669, a Russian religious sect called the Old Believers decided the end of the world was so close, the only logical thing to do was set themselves on fire. Thousands of people literally self-barbecued because they thought Judgment Day was hours away. The apocalypse didn't arrive, but the smoke sure did. Imagine believing so strongly in your end times prediction that you don't even wait for confirmation. You just light the match yourself. It's like pulling the fire alarm in a building you're still standing in. Somewhere in heaven, God must have been face-palming so hard he nearly started another apocalypse. 25. In the 1950s, Dorothy Martin, a Chicago housewife, claimed aliens told her a great flood would destroy Earth on December 21st. Her followers ditched families, sold possessions, and sat in her living room waiting for rescue. Midnight came. No aliens, no flood. Dorothy quickly announced their faith had saved the world. That's not prophecy. That's the cosmic equivalent of forgetting to do your homework and saying, actually, I prevented the assignment from existing. The kicker? Psychologists studied the group and discovered the more wrong Dorothy was, the harder her followers believed. Proof that the only thing stronger than logic is the human ability to double down on stupidity. 26. In 1980, televangelist Hal Lindsey predicted the world would end by 1988. Spoiler, it didn't. Instead, what ended was his credibility. Except not really, because his book, The Late Great Planet Earth, sold millions. Think about that. You can be wrong about literally the biggest prediction in history, and people will still buy your next book. Meanwhile, if a weather forecaster gets the rain wrong once, viewers riot. Apparently, the apocalypse is the only industry where failure makes you more popular, if only airlines work the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, your pilot just crashed us into a cornfield, but don't worry, he's writing a bestseller about it. 27. In the year 1000, Europeans panicked that the calendar hitting 4 digits would trigger the apocalypse. Fields went untended, businesses shut down, and people crowded into churches to await God's grand finale. Midnight came, and nothing. Just another cold morning. It's the original Y2K, but with fewer computers and more plagues. Imagine halting society for a date change, only to realize you still have to get up, feed the chickens, and shovel manure. Humanity basically invented the first system update panic 1,000 years early. The only thing that ended that night was productivity. 28. In 2003, a psychic named Nancy Leader claimed aliens from the Zeta Reticuli star system warned her about Planet X smashing into Earth. She even told parents to euthanize their pets to spare them the apocalypse. People panicked, websites exploded, and then, shocker, nothing happened. The only thing Planet X destroyed was credibility, and even that didn't stick, because Nancy just kept predicting. Imagine being so wrong that your plan involves kill the pets and people still listen to you afterward. At that point, you're not a prophet. You're just the world's worst life coach with a body count. 29. In 1919, Albert Porta, an American meteorologist, predicted that 6 planets would align and create a magnetic storm so powerful it would set the Earth on fire. People panicked, newspapers hyped it, and suicide rates spiked. When nothing happened, Porta became a national joke. Imagine dedicating your life to science, only to be remembered as the guy who thought planets were basically cosmic matches waiting to strike. Honestly, if alignment killed us, the solar system would have wiped us out before Porta even learned long division. But hey, at least he proved one thing. Never trust a scientist named Albert unless his last name is Einstein. 30. In 2012, conspiracy theorists claimed CERN actually did destroy the world when they turned on the Large Hadron Collider. And we've been living in a simulation ever since. Their evidence? Weird coincidences, Mandela effects, and the fact that people still buy Crocs. According to them, we all died quietly in Switzerland, and now we're in a slightly worse copy of reality, which honestly explains a lot about TikTok. It's almost poetic. The most advanced scientific machine in history turned on. And the result wasn't new physics, but an excuse for why your childhood cartoon characters suddenly have different logos. Science didn't end us. Nostalgia did. 31. In 2015, a preacher claimed a blood moon was the sign of imminent apocalypse. People freaked out, wrote books, and posted shaky iPhone videos of the red-tinted moon like it was proof of divine wrath. Fun fact, the moon turns red several times a decade. It's called an eclipse. Nature does it for free, no subscription required. But no, apparently every time the moon changes color, it's another coupon for Armageddon. Imagine living in constant terror of the sky's mood lighting. If your God sends world-ending messages via lunar Instagram filters, maybe the problem isn't astronomy. It's your ability to panic over cosmic screensavers. 32. In the 1970s, a psychic named Jean Dixon predicted the apocalypse would happen in 2020. And sure, 2020 felt like the end. Global pandemic, toilet paper riots, murder hornets. But the world didn't end. We just got a really bad season finale. It's almost unfair. Out of all the times people guessed, Dixon was the closest, and even she couldn't nail it. The irony is painful. Humanity was praying for the rapture, and instead, we just got Zoom meetings and banana bread. Not exactly fire and brimstone. If anything, the real punishment was homeschooling your kids. 33. In 1843, preacher George Rapp convinced his followers the world would end that year. When it didn't, he said, well, maybe next year. By 1847, even his most loyal believers gave up and left. Rapp himself died shortly after, not in an apocalypse, but in bed, like a boring normal person. That's the thing about self-proclaimed prophets. They never predict their own death correctly. They'll map out God's exact timetable, but forget their body can't survive 80 years of bad coffee and worse theology. The universe really knows how to deliver a punchline. 34. In 1982, a planetary alignment was supposed to trigger earthquakes and tidal waves that would obliterate Earth. People panicked, built bunkers, and stocked up on spam like it was the end of Costco. The day came, the planets aligned, and nothing. Not even a tremor. Astronomers called it syzygy. I call it the universe trolling us with Scrabble words. The only thing that shook that day was the economy, when survival stores made a killing selling buckets of dehydrated soup. Turns out Earth's biggest disaster wasn't gravitational pull, it was gullibility. 35. In 1997, a preacher in Texas claimed God told him the world would end on March 8th at exactly 12:01 a.m. His followers gathered, prayed, and stared at the sky, waiting for divine fireworks. Midnight struck. 1 minute, 2 minutes, nothing. Awkward silence. Finally, someone asked what happened, and the preacher said, God just changed his mind. That's the theological equivalent of your date canceling at the last second with a "something came up." Imagine ruining your life, selling everything, only to learn the apocalypse got rescheduled like a dentist appointment. Honestly, if God is that flaky, he belongs on Tinder. 36. In 2000, a cult in Kenya predicted the apocalypse would start with God dropping giant hailstones to kill the wicked. Members sold everything and camped out in churches, waiting for biblical ice cubes. Spoiler, no hail, just a hot, dry day. If you've ever canceled plans because the weather app said rain and it turned out sunny, you've basically experienced what this cult went through, but with your eternal soul on the line. It's almost comforting to know that even divine meteorology can apparently be just as bad as local TV weathermen. 37. In 1874, the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses predicted Christ's invisible return. That's right, invisible, which is a genius loophole because you can't prove him wrong. Oh, you didn't see it? That's because it was invisible. It's the religious version of a kid insisting he has an imaginary dragon that only shows up when you're not looking. You've got to admire the creativity. If you can't make the apocalypse happen, just declare it happened silently in the background, like a divine software update nobody asked for. 38. In 2011, the El Shaddai group in the Philippines predicted the rapture and told followers to burn all their worldly possessions to show faith. People torched clothes, furniture, even family heirlooms, expecting to be whisked away. When nothing happened, they had to explain to their neighbors why they now lived in an empty house with singed walls. Nothing says oops quite like having to rebuy a couch because Jesus ghosted your party invite. At least the neighbors probably scored some free yard sale items from the ashes. 39. In 1346, when the Black Death started ravaging Europe, people decided it must be God punishing humanity and staged giant parades of flagellants, literally whipping themselves bloody in the streets to show repentance. Did it cure the plague? Nope. Did it spread it faster? Absolutely. Imagine trying to stop a pandemic by hosting a nationwide bleed on each other festival. And yet, people lined up to join. Forget masks. Their idea of public health was basically, let's make open wounds trend. Congratulations, medieval Europe. You invented both the super spreader event and the worst parade ever. 40. In 1999, a psychic named Charles Berlitz predicted that Atlantis would rise from the ocean, ushering in the apocalypse. People genuinely believed the lost city would pop up like a soggy Vegas resort. Guess what? The only thing that surfaced was bad sci-fi movies and Atlantis-themed slot machines. If Atlantis really had risen, you know someone would have turned it into a Margaritaville by now. And honestly, that would have been a more believable apocalypse. Humanity drowning, not in floodwaters, but in Jimmy Buffett cover bands. 41. In 2008, a group in Texas claimed the Large Hadron Collider wasn't just going to create a black hole, it was going to open a portal for demons. Yes, Switzerland's most expensive machine was apparently just a satanic easy-bake oven. Protesters actually gathered, convinced scientists were cooking up Hell's Gateway between fondue breaks. Spoiler, no demons. Unless you count physicists arguing about who gets credit for the Higgs boson. Honestly, if demons had come out, at least that would have made physics class more exciting. 42. In the 1800s, Mother Shipton, a supposed English prophetess, predicted the world would end in 1881. The prophecy became so famous that panic swept across England. People sold possessions, and doomsday preachers made a fortune. And then, 1881 came and went, business as usual. Later, scholars discovered the prophecy was forged, centuries after her death. That's right, people rearranged their entire lives because of a fake apocalypse quote. It's basically the 19th century version of sharing a meme on Facebook without checking Snopes. 43. In 1914, preacher Charles Taze Russell predicted Armageddon and that God would destroy all governments, banks, and churches. Except his, of course. Spoiler, banks still exist, governments still exist, and his church is basically a door-to-door marketing company now. If arrogance was a fuel source, Russell could have powered the Industrial Revolution on his ego alone. Imagine being so confident you set a date for the end of the world, then spend eternity remembered as the guy who launched the Apocalypse franchise that never got renewed for Season 2. 44. In 2015, televangelist John Hagee claimed a series of 4 blood moons was a heavenly sign of the apocalypse. People panicked, bought survival gear, and watched the skies. The only thing those moons signaled was great photo ops for Instagram. Meanwhile, Hagee sold books and DVDs like it was an apocalypse merch drop. Honestly, it's impressive. The man monetized a natural eclipse harder than Taylor Swift sells concert tickets. If Armageddon ever does happen, I fully expect him to have a booth selling t-shirts at the gates of hell. 45. In 2000, an Indian cult predicted the world would end and encouraged members to gather on a hilltop for salvation. They waited and waited. Then a thunderstorm rolled in, lightning struck, and several people died. Ironically, the apocalypse prediction didn't come true, but their choice of seating nearly made it a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like shouting, "Nothing bad can happen up here," during a lightning storm. If stupidity was flammable, these people would have combusted on the spot. 46. In 2012, conspiracy theorists claimed the apocalypse would begin because the Earth's poles were going to suddenly flip. Magnetic reversal is real, but it happens over thousands of years, not overnight, like a light switch. that didn't stop survivalists from panicking and buying compasses like they were the last Bitcoin. Spoiler, the poles stayed right where they were, and the only thing that flipped was people's wallets into the hands of doomsday preppers selling survival packages. Turns out, the end of the world is just a very profitable shopping season. 47. In 1993, cult leader David Koresh convinced his followers the apocalypse was coming, which led to the infamous Waco siege. Instead of rapture, what they got was a 51-day standoff with the FBI. If your prophecy ends with tear gas and tanks instead of angels and trumpets, you might have misread the script. Koresh promised eternal glory. What his followers got was a federal raid and a cautionary tale. Honestly, if the world ends with paperwork and press conferences, count me out. 48. In 1967, a UFO cult predicted aliens would destroy Earth, but only the faithful would be saved, in the classic buy your ticket now scam. They even rented a house and waited for the mothership. At midnight, no aliens. The landlord showed up the next morning demanding rent. Imagine expecting cosmic salvation and instead getting a late fee notice. Honestly, if aliens ever do come, they'll probably ask for back rent too. Earth hasn't been paying its bills for centuries. 49. In 2017, a flat earther named Pastor Paul claimed the world would end when the sun and moon aligned with the constellation Virgo. His exact words, "This cannot be coincidence." Spoiler, it can. The alignment happened, Virgo kept glowing, and Earth kept spinning, or, flat circling according to him. It's peak irony. A man who doesn't believe in round planets tried to use astronomy to predict the apocalypse. That's like a vegan predicting the end of the world because McDonald's ran out of nuggets. 50. In 2011, Harold Camping's followers plastered cities with billboards announcing May 21st as Judgment Day. People sold everything, drained savings, and waited. Nothing happened. Camping said, "Oops, it'll actually be October." October came, nothing. He eventually admitted he was wrong, which is impressive because most prophets just doubled down. By the time he died, he was remembered not as a visionary, but as the man who made the apocalypse feel like a Netflix show that keeps teasing a finale but never airs it. 51. And finally, my personal favorite. In 1806, a doomsday preacher in England convinced his town that the world would end because, wait for it, his pet chicken laid eggs with "Christ is coming" written on them. Crowds flocked to see the divine poultry, donations poured in, and panic spread. Turns out, the preacher was just shoving inked eggs back inside the poor hen and letting her relay them. That's right, people rearranged their entire lives because of recycled chicken eggs. If humanity's greatest apocalypse warning came from a bird's backside, then honestly, maybe the world deserved to end. Mic drop. And there you have it. Centuries of human genius wasted on cosmic scams, invisible saviors, and apocalypses so dumb they'd embarrass a middle school science fair. Which one deserves the crown for absolute stupidity? Drop your pick in the comments or add the ridiculous prophecy your uncle still swears by. Hit subscribe if you want more proof that humanity is basically a sitcom with no writer's room.